which we have been getting from the media. And I have to say good night to the members, the other members of the executive of the Compass Foundation, who are working very hard behind the scenes to keep this panel discussion going. So without further ado, I would like to pass you over to our Public Relations Officer, who is going to introduce our two panelists and take us into our panel discussion. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Lisha. A special good evening as well to you, Lisha, Safraz, and of course our distinguished panel. I am quite excited to see where this discussion goes tonight, because as we would have been looking on as a nation as to what would really be the fate of local governments. And so I'm very excited to have this conversation tonight to clarify some of the issues or some of the miscommunication problems that we have been having. Now, as Lisha would have mentioned, the Member of Parliament for St. Augustine, Ms. Khadija Amin, is a young, powerful, and highly competent woman. Khadija has proven herself to be a force to be reckoned with in the political arena. She's currently the Vice Chairman of the United National Congress, and by the age of 17, Khadija was running a homework center and a sports and youth group from her home through her village council in Karapo. She was engaged in squatter regularization, neighborhood watch, fighting for roads, water, and lights for her community. At the age of 21, she was nominated by the party to contest local government elections for the St. Augustine South area, where she served as a councillor for 10 years. In 2010, she became the youngest person in history of Trinidad and Tobago to become a chairman of a regional corporation. She later served as the advisor to the Minister of Local Government, and she has also served in the Senate during the period of 2015 to 2020. In 2020, she contested the constituency of St. Augustine, and she's now the Member of Parliament for that area. She completed her undergraduate studies in public administration at UWI and holds a master's in business administration. So MP Amin, we welcome you. I hope we're giving you a campus welcome. So good evening to you.
Thank you for your welcome, Chris, and thank you all for having me.
Yes, and you look very lovely tonight. I must say that our entire panel, I don't know if we sent out a memo as it pertains to we are wearing gray and black tonight. So I want to move on to our second guest, Mr. Brian Big, who is a friend of the Compass. I know Brian would have supported us from the beginning when we were newly launching and we were newly having conversations, and you would have been supporting us from the get-go. So it's really a pleasure to have you back here tonight to discuss such an important issue. So Brian has been an attorney at law for 11 years, a former legal counsel to two former attorney generals, Mr. Anand Ramlogan and Mr. Gavin Nicholas, former corporate secretary to the Chaguanas Borough Corporation and the San Juan Laventille Regional Corporation. He was also the former chairman of the Seafood Industry Development Company. And of course, he served in the Senate as a temporary senator. So, Mr. Brian, welcome to the campus once again. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure, and it's a great honor to be on the same panel with my NATEX colleague and MP Khadija Amin. I think maybe it's the first time I'm doing something like this with Khadija. So the honor is all mine.
So without any further ado, right, we are discussing local government business tonight. And, you know, as Lisha would have rightly put it, the Honorable Minister of Local Government, he's a new Minister of Local Government, and he would have held a press conference, and a lot of, you know, things came out of that. We would have seen that there's an extension of 1 year for our local government practitioners. So it means that the election is now delayed, or there's something going on beyond our imagination as the general public. But of course, we have an attorney here tonight, and we have the MP who shadows this area, this portfolio. So where are we right now? MP, I want to get into the extension of the life of local government practitioners and postponement. what is going on? What does that mean? Because we were supposed to have an election this year, not so? Well, ending this year early into next year.
Yes, Chris, you are correct. The current local government term ends on December 2nd, which is the 3rd anniversary of the last election. And one would expect that within 90 days of that expiration date, there will be a local government election. Local government election is not in the Constitution. It's not protected by the Constitution. So a simple majority in Parliament could change the date of the elections. And we saw that happen under the Patrick Manning administration, where on 3 separate occasions, the life of the term of a councillor was extended for 1 year on each occasion. And to me, that really is an undermining of democracy. It is important to preserve democracy and to allow people to have their say, have their vote. A local government is the closest arm of government to the people. And it is also a pulse that you can tell how the electorate feels, even outside of a general election that would change who is in government, who is in charge. And the fact that the ground and the pulse is not in the favor of the PNM right now, I think that really is the reason for their postponement. We have seen many people affected by joblessness, hopelessness, violence, crime and violence in our country, violence against women and girls. We have seen children in schools facing all sorts of issues. And it is clear that the government is unable to handle what is taking place in the country. They have created so many problems. And you also have a sense of injustice being created by on the flip side, people are feeling the hardship on one hand, but on the other hand, what you have is nepotism, corruption, millions of dollars going to friends, family, and financiers. And that has created a sense of anger in the citizenry. And so I think the PNM knows that if they call the election when it is due, they will lose. They will lose not only electoral districts, but they will lose maybe corporations. And for them, that will be an indictment on them and on their performance. So they have chosen to gamble by postponing the election. And I think that is the core reason for postponing the elections. Because when I look at reform, which is the excuse for the postponement, reform is a process. It is not a one-off thing. Reform takes time, and there is no need to postpone the election to initiate reform. The election could take place, and then the reform continues. In fact, you can have reform continuing through several terms. So the excuse that they have used is a very poor one, and you now have a situation where councillors will go from 3 years to 4 years, but the 4-year term is a full-time term. At present, councillors are considered part-time, as are MPs, by the way, and it is only when or if you accept an appointment in the cabinet, in the executive of the government, that you are considered full-time. This is similar to what is proposed in the local government, the new local government legislation, so that if a councillor is elected, they are part-time, but if they choose to accept an appointment on the executive council, they are responsible for a particular portfolio just as a minister, but that is full-time. It means that a person, a councillor or alderman now will have to either resign their job or resign their post as a councillor or alderman, and it really leaves people in a quandary. It also means that the electorate may suffer if a person chooses to resign as a councillor. We have councillors and aldermen who come from all walks of life. We have some who are teachers, medical practitioners, attorneys at law, on both sides of the fence. Are you going to force those people to give up their jobs? Yes, they have indicated that you will have a more meaningful salary or stipend, but it is a 4-year term. You do not have that security that you may have with your regular job. And so I think it's important to allow people the opportunity to make that decision. Do I want to continue in this political uncertainty of being an elected representative, or do I want to give up one or the other? And where if you have an election, it means that the terms and conditions that the political parties will engage candidates will be different. When you do screening, you will inquire about people's availability and that kind of thing. And some people may choose to not offer themselves for re-election or for nomination because of their job situation. Some may choose to leave their job. So quite frankly, you will run into problems with the current councillors who are now being forced to either resign as a councillor or resign their regular job. The right thing to do is to call the election and let those who are willing to serve full-time offer themselves, go through the screening process of their respective political parties, and then start the term on the new terms and conditions, which includes being full-time, which includes being paid, better paid, as well as the 4-year term instead of 3 years.
Well, this, what you just said there, MP Amin, is shocking to me, because I am confused right now from a logistics point of view. How does someone just move from part-time to full-time? How is that? I mean, how are they going to work that out without consulting with those who are involved? As you say, many of them already have full-time jobs. So how do you just force someone to go from part-time to full-time? How logistically, how does that work?
I don't think the Attorney General or those in government had time to think it through. They are probably not well connected on the ground and practical enough to give that some thought. It also, I mean, you can borrow from an industrial relations perspective in terms of this being a unilateral decision to change the terms and conditions of the councillors and aldermen's employment or engagement without consulting them. It is unilateral. It is only proposed by one party. There's no point for the others to agree, for the councillors and aldermen to agree. And that, I think, is just poor practice. Whether, I mean, the attorneys will speak in terms of the law and what the law provides and how it can be challenged. But to me, from a practical perspective, the best thing to do is to call the elections when they are due and allow people to make that decision. Do I want to be a councillor or alderman under these new terms and conditions?
Agreed, fully agreed. I mean, having worked full-time in the what I consider to be the public service, I mean, for 30 years, to me, this is something that is unheard of. You don't just, I mean, at the snap of your fingers, move somebody from part-time to full-time without thorough consultation. Now, my understanding is the legislation would have been passed, right? It was passed. So they are more or less they are about to operationalize it, yes. Right? I'm very interested to see how that is going to work. I mean, there is some very valid points there, like, do the existing councillors and aldermen, do they really want to continue for an additional year, right? And one of the things that I wanted to know personally is why go from 3 years to 4 years? This is a contract position, and it will remain a contract position from my understanding. I think the norm now is to reduce the duration of the contracts, not extend them. You would think that by reducing it from 3 years to 2 years would motivate people to perform better. But when you increase it by an additional year, I mean, that would have the adverse effect. That is just some thoughts that I have. Safra, go ahead.
Right. So the learned MP, MP Khadija, as stated before, you were actually a past chairman of the Tunapuna Regional Corporation, Piako Regional Corporation, and therefore your feet are actually on the ground and you are wet in terms of local government issues. And you mentioned that there is also a dimension which will border on legal parameters now. And I want to bring in Brian here and ask Brian, with respect to Mr. Ravi Balgobin Maharaj latest move via attorney Anand Ramlogan, which they are challenging this this proclamation.
or partial proclamation of the Municipal Corporation Act. What are your thoughts? Or can you offer some thoughts on it? The pre-action protocol, and can you put this whole issue in perspective in terms of the legal jargon first?
Yes, well, again, a pleasant good night to you all and good night to Trinidad and Tobago. You see, seeing the pre-action protocol letter that was sent on behalf of Mr. Ravi Bhargavan Maraj by his attorneys, that's coming from former Attorney General Anand Ramlogan, it was quite clear from what you saw from that Mr. Bhargavan has issued to the government, and what they have done is totally wrong. It has now allowed Mr. Bhargavan, who is a burgess of an area and a district of the Santa Margarita area, where you have robbed him of his right of having an elections being called. And we have to understand that there's something called the legitimate expectation, that legitimate expectation of an elections to be called. And by not allowing that, you have just disenfranchised not only Mr. Bhargavan, but you've disenfranchised Trinidad in that of being able to vote for a candidate for local government of your choice. And by you doing that, this can be seen as an abuse of power. This can be seen as an act where you have delayed democracy. So we must understand that, as far as I'm concerned, the government may say that they have achieved something, but it is democracy that has totally suffered here. That you have taken away the rights of citizens, and any government, any democratic state ought not to have done that. In 2003, Khadija would be very much aware of this. When Patrick Manning, then Prime Minister, had denied a nation the rights to go to the polls, and he used the excuse of local government reform. So local government reform, 2003, 2006, 2009. So you had no elections coming there. 2010, we had local government elections where the People's Partnership would have won office, and then the People's Partnership would have also retained and even won corporations in 2010. Local government reform should never be a reason to deny the electorate, because this whole thing was going on even when Dr. Rowley's administration came in 2015, with the then local government minister, now departed, he rest in peace, Franklin Khan. And he talked about it and said, and they went to corporation to corporation to corporation. And they were supposed to bring about a white paper dossier. I wonder if Khadija would remember this. And that white paper dossier was delayed for 2 years until it took the leader of the opposition, Mrs. Kamla Prasad Visesa, who had to say, is either you bring the dossier or we go to court. Lo and behold, poof, like magic.
So what I got from what you're saying here is that under the PNM regime, there's a propensity to postpone local government elections, one, whereas with the UNC, the UNC always holding the elections on time when it is due. And secondly, is it a case that democracy delayed is democracy denied? Taken from the adage, justice delayed is justice denied.
Yes, because you see, the beauty of the Judicial Review Act, Chapter 708, is that it allows for the common man, and we must thank the United National Congress for ensuring that the Judicial Review Act came into play. All right? Mm-hmm. That for you to come there, you must show that the decision was in fact way unauthorized and contrary to law. That is why Mr. Bhargavan, through his attorneys, has given the government a deadline of the 14th of November, if I'm not mistaken. Also, it is to the excess of a jurisdiction. When I believe, with all due respect to Mr. Arawi, he has gone off his jurisdiction here as the Minister of Local Government in understanding even his role, in that you've come to partially have legislation be brought forward. And you're seeing a trend with this government, as they try to do it as well with the Procurement Act, right? So it's also an abuse of power, because now you are telling the country, well, here what? You ain't getting no election this year. You'll get next year. And that is also where in that issues under the Judicial Review Act, is that ensure that if there's an error of law, that the court must come to know, tell us if there is a error in law or breach or omission to perform a duty. And I believe here that the minister has breached in performing his duty in informing corporations come December, your term is coming to an end. At your last and next statutory meeting, you tell your corporations, we thank you for having us as your counsel. We now wait for the election writ to be called. Because you must understand, I would remember before I became an attorney at law, I was working in Tower Lavender Regional Corporation as just a mere staff member. My job at that time was to pay councillors. And Khadija would remember this. That in 2003, when there was an extend councils and then 2006, Mr. Manning, through his then wife, who was the Minister of Local Government, Hazel Manning, decided that they would make a decision that councils would now become not councillors, advisors to council. And that caused headaches in corporation because as the job of mine was to pay council, I had to change pay slips from councillors to advisor in council. And cause a lot of problems. So if we come back again to the reasons you can bring under the Judicial Review Act, is that you allow the deprivation again of the legitimate of expectation, because you also have persons who want to file back to go back as a councillor. So you have that legitimate expectation to file and screen and contest an election once you are selected by whichever party you contest. I can tell you that there are, and Khadija is quite correct, that there are councillors from the other side of the fence called the People's National Movement. Is very upset with this as well.
Yes.
Right? Also,
I do want to ask a question though, right? Why not have the elections and then implement the legislation?
Exactly. But I'm glad you...
Why is that not an option?
This is the question that Faris Alwari has to answer. And he was really at pains to try to give some kind of logical explanation at his press conference on Thursday. The media did ask the question. The logical thing to do will be to call the election and engage councillors and aldermen on these new terms, this new term in office, the new salary, the full-time arrangement, and so on. That is logical. Faris Alwari, poor fella, he has a reputation of not being the brightest lawyer in the country, and he felt it necessary to try to explain, and the more he explained, I felt the more he did an injustice to the decision of the government. There is no logical explanation. Even if he wants to use the excuse that the law is being partially proclaimed, and that part of the law that describes the terms of engagement for councillors is part of what is being proclaimed. The truth is that the government, the cabinet, has control over what is proclaimed. Many times you will have legislation being debated and passed in Parliament, and the cabinet will advise the president as to when this should be proclaimed based on their own schedule of things. They may be launching different programs. They may want it to coincide with other things happening. They may want to wait for another piece of legislation. They may want to wait for practically to be ready to set up, to institutionalize, to put infrastructure in place to give birth to an institution that the legislation provided for. There are reasons that the cabinet will give the president dates. So the cabinet chose this date. It is not as though the date for proclamation of these clauses is out of the hands of the government. The government would advise the president, and so the government could advise the president differently. Unfortunately, if Faris Alwari is giving legal advice, we know what happens, and as has happened in the past. So you are right, Lisha, it really defies logic. It defies logic. There is no logical explanation. But we will run into practical problems on the ground, not only for our councillors, but also for officers within the regional corporations, because there are different ways to engage and recruit and hire chief officers and CEOs and so on as well. And that will also have implications on the performance of the regional corporations.
MP, I want to ask you this, right? That what guarantee does the nation have that a year from now the government is going to call election? They may say that they're not ready as yet and postpone it for another year. So again,
frankly, I do not put that past this government. In 2003, when I was elected for a 3-year term. We were all expecting local government elections to be held in 2006. The government went to Parliament and postponed the elections for 1 year. And we expected at the end of that 1 year, we will have elections. And that went on for 3 years until on 3 occasions, there was this announcement and postponement. And on 2010, when Kamala Persad-Bissessar became Prime Minister, that is when you had local government elections. So again, it speaks to the PNM eroding democracy, not allowing citizens to have their say. And another excuse that I saw that the minister used was that it will give the regional corporations an additional year to perform. This from a government that has every year systematically reduced the funding in local government, reduced the powers of local government, either politically or institutionally. The same legislation existed when the UNC was in government. I was chairman of a corporation and I was amazed. We completed 4 times the number of projects that a regional corporation like ours had done previously because of political will, because of technical support, because of monies being released on time. What you have now is less money going to the regional corporation, but you also have late releases, meaning that they cannot start their projects in the dry season, for instance. When they get the releases late, you may have weather conditions, you may have other situations preventing them from kicking off. And sometimes the funding is returned to the consolidated fund, so they lose funding. And what also happens is that the government has been systematically, institutionally, undermining them. So, for instance, the creation of this special purpose secondary roads company, that company has been designed to do something that local government is required to do in law, which is to maintain secondary roads. By creating this special purpose company, they have now found $200 million to put into that company, which will have a PNM appointed board of directors, which the PNM will have control over who will get which contracts. And that $200 million should have gone to regional corporations to maintain the roads that already fall under them. But there are many roads, for instance, that previously were maintained by the now defunct Caroni 1975 Limited and Petrotrin. Many of those public spaces, roads, parks, water courses, who is going to maintain those now? It is the regional corporations. They are already being called upon to do these additional works. And the Ministry of Works has been very negligent. So many corporations have had to send resources, material, manpower to do repairs on Ministry of Works roads. So it is really, it is not giving more time doesn't give them more space to perform if the government continues to undermine local government the way it has done over the past 7 years.
Now, I want to just announce that we will be taking some questions from the audience when we're about to close. But I'm listening on here, and this is the purpose of the campus. We sort of sit down and we have these discussions surrounding policies and positions of the government or the opposition. And, I recalled the 6-6 deadlock in Tobago just a few months ago. And I remembered that 6 seats went in the favor of the PNM and the 6 seats went in the favor of the PDP. And they were at this position where, what do we do now? There were conversations behind power sharing, several consultations as to where we go from this, right? Or from here. And the government decided that it makes best sense for us to go back to the polls and let us have a majority make that decision, because clearly we are equal right now and no one seems to want to cede. We had a position where, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong, there's 7-7 with the corporations in Trinidad, not so? It's 7-7, right? 7 is held by the UNC and 7 is held by the PNM.
Yes.
Now, the PNM is proposing this, and the UNC did not attend the meetings because clearly that is not the UNC's position on that. So there's this disagreement. So shouldn't the practical thing, if you did it a few months ago, there was a disagreement between 6-6, there's a disagreement between 7-7. Shouldn't we be at the polls already? Is the government, are they being hypocritical right now as it pertains to their own stance a few months ago, MB?
Well, indeed, but the difference is that in Trinidad and Tobago, the number of corporations you win does not, you can win all the regional corporations in the country. It does not put you in a position in government. So that, for instance, the UNC currently has 7 and the PNM has 7, where you have, we do have provisions for breaking a deadlock in the past where they used to pull straws and it really was a gamble. And you had Superior Region, for instance, Mayaro Corporation, Mayaro Rio Claro, who had to pull straws because they had an even number of councillors on different sides of the political fence. There were recommendations for that tiebreaker to be included in the legislation. And I remember at the committee stage, the chairman, which was Mr. Clarence Rambara, indicating we could look at that at a later date. You know, but that is a critical part to me, of democracy being allowed to work, because we saw in Sandy Grande region where, and in the occasion previous to this 2016, where the PNM won 4 and the UNC won 4, and the PNM proceeded to just on their own decide that because they are already in charge of the corporation, that they should continue to be in charge, and that is not the way democracy works. At the subsequent election in 2019, the UNC won that corporation away from the PNM, and there are other corporations that could change hands in this election, this upcoming election. So you are right.
No,
you are that their stance at that time was in favor of democracy. It was in favor of allowing people to vote. But democracy, you should not agree to elections based on whether you should win or not. It is to allow the will of the people to be heard. So there is a hypocrisy on the part of the government where they propose to have elections, have democracy operate when it suits them, but when they feel it will not be in their favor, they are suddenly postponing the elections.
As we on the point of convenience, the government's convenience, I want to get into the geographical discrimination. The opposition, we hear it before the local government election, sometimes after, sometimes during that, there is geographical discrimination. And many persons may say, well, that's UNC PNM fighting on each other, but it is not. It is not. Can you explain to us really what really is this geographic discrimination? And maybe you may have to refer to, I guess, the allocations or something, but, you know, explain that to us, explain that to our viewers. What does that really mean, and how does the PNM go about doing that?
Well, first of all, you have a very unfair system that has to be addressed. In some regions, you have an electorate as small as 3,000 persons. In others, the electorate is as large as 12 or 10,000. So whereas one councillor will have to get up to 10,000 votes to win a seat in some regions, in another region, you have 3 councillors, they get 3 members if they get that number of votes. So we have been asking for that to be examined as part of the reform and to ensure that there is roughly an even number of voters in every electoral district in Trinidad. Apart from the number of electors in each electoral district, there is a disproportionate number of districts in certain regions. Some regions have as many as 16 councillors, while some have 6 and 8. So the resources that go to each region is distributed by electoral district. And for those that have more councillors, more districts, the resources will have to be more thinly spread than those that have fewer districts. And of course, on the next level, the number of burgesses to benefit in each district, also the resources will be spread thinner. To me, I don't think it is a coincidence that the top 4 highest funded regions are held by the PNM. And those are Port of Spain City, San Fernando City, Point Fortin Borough, and Arima Borough Corporation. Those are held by the PNM, and those have been the top funded corporations. While on the flip side, the 4 lowest funded regions are Princestown, Pinal Davie, Hoover Tabaquite, and I want to bring in Chaguanas Borough because Tunapuna Piako gets less than Chaguanas Borough. But Chaguanas is a borough. And if you have to compare Chaguanas Borough with the other boroughs and cities within the municipal structure, Chaguanas is the lowest funded and the most highly populated. Again, it is held by the UNC. So if you look at just the numbers, just the amount of funding that goes to each region, and you do a simple maths based on the number of burgesses, number of citizens to be serviced by the monies that come to these regional corporations. In the Hoover Tabaquite, you have $1.50 per burgess, whereas in the Port of Spain Corporation City, you have $16 per burgess. And it shows huge disparity in the money that is allocated per citizen to conduct basic things like flood prevention, garbage collection, and other responsibilities in local government. So geographic discrimination is real. It is not the UNC crying wolf. The figures are there to prove it. We did not do any magic with the numbers. This is what the PNM has done over the years. But what they also have done is reduce the funding significantly over the years. And we have done, the opposition research team has done that kind of analysis and comparison to show what the UNC would have been allocated to all corporations compared to what is being allocated now. And we must also look at the performance in terms of what was done with that money, what was done with those resources, in terms of the number of roads that were fixed and so on. I mean, they used to call us the box drain government, as though that is something wrong. I mean, we wish we had more box drains and road patching and road paving now, given the conditions of the roads and the constant flooding. So we have to also look at what the UNC did while in government, what it achieved, in addition to how much money was given.
Well, what I want to ask you, right, is what formula does the Minister of Finance utilize? Or is it the Minister of Finance or is it the Minister of Local Government that takes the money and say, okay, Kuva Tawakid, you all gain 10 million.
Criteria.
Or in general, what criteria they utilize to allocate the money to the different corporations, one, and two, by them holding back on the releases. Is that a form of discrimination also? Is it deliberate, or is it that poor planning and they don't have money to release to the corporations after they promise the corporation you'll get that allocation?
Yes. So the Minister of Finance is the one who allocates money to all state agencies or statutory bodies in the budget. Right. I think many times the Minister of Finance is very aware of the shortcomings because based on our questions in Parliament and Standing Finance Committee and so on, the Minister is aware that he is not allocating what is needed. And he doesn't seem to care. That is one. Your second question was with regards to the late releases, and that has been a persistent problem within the government, within local government, and within regional corporations. But at first I wanted to believe it was because they didn't have the money and things tight, but then I see them finding money for other things. I see them finding $200 million to immediately invest in a company that has not even been registered for PNM friends and financiers to get contracts to pave roads. I see them finding monies and for all sorts of things other than the needs of the people. So I refuse to believe that. What I also see is that the government has been using the it's what they call non-expenditure. The minister came to Parliament and accused regional corporations of not spending money, even though they are asking for more. What he didn't tell the nation is that they could not spend the money when releases are made on the last day of the financial year. And that is what happens in regional corporations. And then they come back and they blame the corporation. But it is, I believed it was planning on behalf of the government. Now I believe it is a deliberate effort to undermine the corporations and prevent them from utilizing the money so that they will have money coming back into the consolidated fund to use in the next financial year. It is too deliberate. It cannot be carelessness. It cannot just, I don't think any one person or any one government could be that incompetent. I think it really is a deliberate ploy on their behalf.
But now, Brian, is there, a legal aspect which I'm not suggesting that the opposition take it if there is any, but I'm asking, is there some sort of legal way to fight something like this? I mean, you are hearing the MP speaking about there's no sort of criteria. Is there a best practice, a particular international standard that should be followed?
When the Shokonas Borough Corporation, via the mayor of Shokonas, indicated of how they were being starved for funds. And the mayor got some legal advice and the fact that you can't take the ministry to court for not giving you the monies that you need because of the fact that, as you would recall, you had where staff members were planning to protest. You had where workers, I can tell you, were meeting with lawyers to bring an action against the corporation for not getting paid on time.
Wow.
So there are ways about it, but even to add to what MP Khadija Amin is talking about with the issue, even of the local government, where they are being treated in a certain way of disdain, right? Is that even with allocations, I listen to the Parliament very well because I'm closely related to Komoto Manzanilla, which also falls under the Toko Sangre Grande Corporation. And I listened to the MP for Toko Sangre Grande where he said that Sangre Grande Regional Corporation got an increase in allocations. But I think he was reading the wrong yellow book. Because in 2022, there was an increase. But I don't think, like I said, I think he was watching the 2022 book. Because in 2023, Sangre Grande Regional Corporation revised estimate of 2022, right? Was 75 million, right? Then in 2023, the estimate was taken to 74. So there was a decrease in their allocation. And as I don't know if you noticed, but right now in Sangre Grande and environs, people can't even get truck-borne water. You know why? Corporation trucks, they don't have money to buy trucks. There's flooding in that district. You know why? The issue of getting persons to help with getting contractors to come in to assist with the corporation, you can't get that done. So that's why there's massive flooding in the Sangre Grande region. And it's not because of rainfall, as said by the Minister of Works and Transport. It's because of geographical discrimination within that district, among others. It has led to flooding. It has led to poor management of roads. And Khadija was quite correct that company that was created to help with fixing roads, that imagine in 2020-21, when that company was created, the company was not even registered at that time, yet money was allocated. So if your company is not registered, how can it work? And now they get another 100 million a year. So they have 200 million to use. And where the money is going, Lord alone knows. So we have to also understand, and Khadija raised a very good point about the issue of hypocrisy with this government, my friend. And I want to raise that as well. Because it is this government that said, well, we need to meet. So the opposition then said, well, let's have a joint select committee. And there was a joint select committee on the issue of local government reform. And during that committee, which went to the Parliament, and the answer is quite clear to see, where the government said, we're going to have an election. Faris at that time was Attorney General, right? Kazim Hussein was Minister of Local Government. And they said they're going to have an election, and we will have an election. Now come where you have a difference of rules, where Faris Alwari is now the Minister of Local Government. Guess what? It's hypocrisy where in their own Joint Select Committee, where they have now defeated the purpose of having that Joint Select Committee in the first place. So now, egg is on the face of Faris Alwari, because Khadija was quite correct, MP Andy, where he was fighting for words to get reasons why. So, to respect, if you look at the bill, and you look at the bill that was passed, and you look at the debate, there's nothing in the debate that stated, there's nothing in the bill that states where in which they will postpone the election to next year. And we will have election next year. There's nothing about the bill.
All right,
No, I just one point that was raised earlier with regards to the formula for funding regional corporations. It came to me that during the PNM's political campaign on reform, they promised to use the THA model, where the THA has a 4% guarantee of the national budget that is allocated to the THA. They have a percentage that is used. So whether that is in law or in practice, the minister gave the expectation to the citizens that a fixed percentage of the national budget will go to regional corporations. And that again is another broken promise. I just took the opportunity to look at some of the comments on the feed for those who are listening in live. And one of the issues raised here is a key issue that the UNC has been speaking of, and that is where the funding will come from. And the government has been saying we will get it from property tax. The UNC is strongly opposed to property tax at this time. We are recovering from a pandemic, and many people still do not have jobs. Businesses are still recovering. But the PNM is not telling the population that the bulk of property tax will go to the consolidated fund. Residential property tax is proposed to go to the regional corporation. And quite frankly, that is a small percentage compared to the overall tax, what the property tax should bring in, which should include commercial and industrial as well as agricultural. Many of the built-up commercial areas fall within town centers. They fall within cities, boroughs, and regional corporations. I can tell you in my area, in Tunapuna, Piako, you have town centers such as Tunapuna itself, Kura, Aruka, St. Helena, and some of those other areas that may be classified as commercial. And who maintains those areas? It is the regional corporation. So that the commercial taxes will then be going to the central government. And it is a trick. It is a trick just as they used when they told us they were going to reduce the VAT from 15 to 12.5%. And they failed to tell us that they will also increase thousands of items from 0% to 12.5%. And overall, in fact, in their budget documents, you saw where they had a projected increase from value-added tax collection. So again, it is a trick where they tell you, we want you to support this property tax because that way corporations will get more money to fix the potholes and fix the flooding. But they are not telling you that the bulk of the property tax will go to buy boats, to buy paintings, to pay for more Nelson deals and other things.
Oh Lord. Not Nelson deals. Now, I want to give a shout out to Councillor Shanti Budram.
It is quite correct. Because not only that, a lot of monies, and again, the answer is so right there to see that the consolidated fund as well was showed. That monies that will be taken from local government, right, is not going to help with anything with building fixing a pothole or building a road. It goes back to the consolidated fund. So how in God's green earth would that help? How? And then not only that, I would always remember my days working in regional corporations where a former CEO who had to come back dejected when because remember, CEOs as well are asked to give their estimates as well, so how much your corporation will be looking to have. And it was, you know what that CEO said? Why you asked us to give us an estimate in the first place? When you tell them, you asked for 2 million, we give you 100,000, right? And then there's no proper explanation given by that of budget divisions. You know what they say? That is a decision given by the Minister of Finance, right? And Khadija would know about this well, being a former chairman. I know about this being a former chairman of a board. Well, that's the answer they give you. That is the answer they give you, and you have to go home dejected, and then hope that they give you back.
I must point out that over the last month or so, since the last budget, there was a massive protest outside Parliament. There were also numerous regional corporation chairmen who spoke out publicly in the media. And several regional corporations also debated and passed motions of no confidence, or rather, well, no confidence. I say no confidence in the Minister of Finance, but the motion really condemned the allocation given to the regional corporation and called on the minister to give a better allocation. And in several cases, their motions were carried, they were successful, and there was a newspaper article on it. And chairmen such as Henry Awong of Kuva Tabakit, Pinal Debe, Dr. Alan Sami, and Princess Tong, Gori Rupnarayan, very experienced on-the-ground men, spoke about the practical undermining of local government based on the allocation of resources. So it might be useful to share that article, which covers some of the basis of these motions that were passed in the regional corporations.
All right, we would like to acknowledge the presence of a few members of the audience. We're seeing Chairman Henry Awong, who is the chairman of the Kuba Tabaki Talparo Regional Corporation. So thanks for joining us. Chris was saying Councillor Shanti Budram is with us, right? We are also seeing Councillor Richard Rampasad as well as Councillor Ryan Rampasad. So we just want to say thanks to everybody who has joined us.
And
they are live with us.
Alderman Angie Benjamin as well. I saw her logged in as well. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we do appreciate the support. There's one thing. Go ahead, Brian.
I want to let you all know that yes, Khadija did make mention that yes, local government is not enshrined in our constitution, but we must also remember our history with local government. That it took 2 previous administrations to give local government some form of teeth, some form of belonging within our legal system in Trinidad and Tobago. I go back to 1999 under the then Pandey administration, in which Mr. Pandey as Prime Minister instructed the Attorney General to ensure that local government bodies are able to defend themselves. Hence why, with the amendments to the legislation, that local government bodies also will become what is called a corporate body of their own, right? In which they can defend themselves. Now, and like that, in 2013, under the People's Partner, under Kamala Prasad as Prime Minister, local government got more teeth to operate with, in that you are allowed to have chief officers, wherein that these chief officers could have more power. Previously, before 2013, your chief officers were just basically like a head of the party. But your chief officers in 2013 could have made more decisions, because as a former corporate secretary, I can tell you that as corporate secretaries under the Act when amended, is that corporate secretaries then became the legal advisor to council. Not just sitting down in council and taking notes. You became the legal advisor to council. And further to that, Kamala Prasad also ensured that aldermen were then brought in differently under proportional representation. And that showed constitutional reform, but constitutional reform in a way of making local government more amenable, more accessible, more actionable as well. In which you also ensure that local government can fund themselves as well. In which the corporations, 2013-2014, began with councils, offices, and allow where the corporation can help pay their rents for them. And I'm sure they would agree with me that right now that is not the case. Where I can tell you, I have had councillors coming to me, believe it or not, from the People's National Movement, and they're talking about how they're under pressure with even paying their own rents. And our own councillors are feeling that under the United National Congress. And very soon, you might hear a corporation being taken to court by a councillor for not paying his rent. So be careful.
Yeah, if things are so bad that, thankfully, Kamala Prasad Bissessa provided offices for councillors during that time in office, secretary and a little stipend to buy paper and coffee and things. Things are so bad now that the regional corporations are behind in rent, not paying. There are councillors who have been evicted from their offices because the corporation has not been paying the landlords. And it is a small sum, but when it builds up, it's so embarrassing for a councillor to have to be evicted. These are simple things if you want to speak about empowering local government and empowering councillors that, Faris Alwari has to account for and the government has to account for.
Khadija, I can tell you that landlords are considering of action against corporations for not getting their rents. I can tell you that. And we must understand.
One other thing that I felt was very practical as well. When Kamala Prasad Bissessa was in government, councillors got offices, they got a secretary, they got a stipend for incidentals in their office, but there was also a provision for a tax benefit, tax exemption for councillors when they purchase vehicles. It was a trial for, I think it was for a 1 year period or so. And I remember Hassan Barath was the Minister of Trade at that time, and he was responsible for working it out. And if the PNM is serious about empowering councillors, while MPs and government ministers enjoy huge tax exemptions, if they care about local government, they will take to cabinet and take to parliament exemptions for councillors to better be able to afford working vehicles, because a councillor is a mobile person who has to visit complaints, visit bridges, and so on. So you sit in your high office and talk about empowering local government councillors and giving you more money. Councillors don't want more money, they want more power and authority, they want the resources to be able to service their burgesses. They didn't come into this job for money. You know what the stipend of a councillor is? It is about $5,000. So councillors didn't come into this for money. So one of the things that I feel is that there are meaningful ways that the PNM can empower local government, and they have neglected to do so.
But in addition to that, we must look at the broken promises to local government by this current administration. One such thing was the issue where the PNM indicated that they were going to increase the number of municipal police to help fight crime. And that is said here in the parliament, right, where they were going to put 100 new officers out. I want to tell you that municipal officers are treated as bastard children. And I say it with no apologies. Because officers who come to my offices, because most of those officers, believe it or not, they are SRP officers. Believe it or not, they are SRP officers. They are not full officers under the establishment of the TTPS, right? Some of them are also contracted officers, right, under the SRPs. And sometimes when they have problems, you know what they do? They jump up, get out, and they look to join TTPS fully. I can tell you there are some municipal police officers, I wouldn't even call it a police station, I'll call it a shed, where they're kept to stay, and they're leaking roofs. I'll even go as far as, if you would remember, when there was a special committee met at the parliament, where you had a municipal police inspector had to inform the police, inform the parliament. I think Khadija would have been there. At that time, I think Khadija would have been a senator, where that inspector had to say that the officers that he have, the gun that he have is like a caps gun to the guns of bandits that are, which you would say goes rat-tat-tat-tat. And I quote him literally, right? Because I had to do some research on that day for someone, right? And we must also understand that it was the People's Partnership who ensured that municipal police had some form of teeth in apprehending people, wherein that taking them to court. Because before, municipal police officers was being called the Baji and Melanjan police, or they call them market police. Where instead, you had where municipal officers were issuing tickets. They were also charging persons. And that happened in the municipal corporation of the as borough corporation. Right. I was the corporate secretary there. That's how I did.
Ben, I would like to ask the MP this question. MP, if the UNC were in power, like how would the UNC do things?
Time really flies. Okay, you're back.
Yeah, you all hear me?
All right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. MP, if the UNC were in power, what changes would you have made to the local government system, or how would you have done things differently as compared to how the PNM is doing things right now?
Well, I can tell you that one of the things that is required in local government to empower local government councillors, regional corporations, and local government as a whole is political will. You can have what legislation if you continue to function like the PNM in undermining the regional corporations, you will have disempowerment and failure. And that is what they have been doing. The approach of the United National Congress has always been people-centered. In fact, even when Basdev Pandey was leader, you had his government, you had a lot more happening in local government. Kamla Prasad Bisesa really took local government to greater heights in Trinidad and Tobago, where it was in terms of actually performing. So it is no secret that the UNC's approach to local government is more of empowerment and allowing them to perform. What we also do have is a national economic recovery plan that ties in regions into the development of the economic drivers. So that, for instance, in Sandy Grande region, where you have agriculture and fisheries, where you have on the east-west corridor in the region of Tunapuna, Piako, you have manufacturing, where you have in the southwest peninsula. So you have drivers to the economy, and local economic development is a part of national economic development and our recovery out of the COVID pandemic in terms of our economic recovery. So that providing jobs for persons is not only in Port of Spain, it must happen in every part of the country. Entrepreneurship must happen in every part of the country. Micro-entrepreneurs must be encouraged. Local tourism, local agriculture, local fisheries, local industries must be allowed to blossom. Part of that is infrastructural development. So, for instance, at present, you have a local tourism site in terms of the Devil's Wood Yard, the mud volcano. But the road to reach to that site is in such a horrible condition that you have less local tourists going there. What happens to the vendors? What happens to the micro entrepreneurs who come out of their house and set up and sell local delicacies, craft, and so on? They lose an income because of poor infrastructure. So that is one way where infrastructure has to support local economic development. Training and providing facilities as well. You must have not just markets to sell food crop, but also markets for craft and markets for things that are indigenous to various areas. Anybody can tell you Debe is associated with doubles. Why? Because it has become a traditional thing of that area. And so in every area, in many areas, there are cultural food items and craft items and performances and so on. You know, you could go to Lopino for parang. You know, you could go, to Debe for doubles. You know, you could go to certain areas for certain things. So these are things that we have to encourage from the ground up. And of course, the National Economic Development Plan will also speak to international relations in terms of revenue earners, diversification, and so on. So local government, in my humble opinion, does have a huge role to play in our economic recovery out of the PNM's mismanagement and the COVID pandemic. And we also have a process where we develop a manifesto. So of course, even now, there are persons who continue to send sound suggestions, technically correct things that will be recommended and will be included because of the UNC's approach in terms of all-inclusiveness. But certainly when the time is right, we will have a UNC local government manifesto that will speak of these plans.
I hope when you...
So what you have said, and then what Khadija has also said, is that I can always say that having been part of the administrative part of local government, under the People's Partnership regime between 2010 and 2015, local government was very much given a lot of empowerment, where you will see a lot of corporations also twinning with foreign jurisdictions under the period 2010 to 2015. And you also saw where there was the enforcement being done by local government corporations, especially with that, when you had corporations bringing demolition orders. I can tell you, Shogunas Borough, almost every 3 weeks, demolition orders was being brought forward for persons who were in breach of the law. Because we must understand the Municipal Corporations Act is very much a live piece of legislation that allows where persons who breaches the law by way of, if they infringe by persons' properties, by persons doing wrongs in marketplaces, local government was given much more enforcement on, from 2010 to 2015. Now, you're not seeing that. Because when you have a minister, with all due respect to Mr. Faris Arawi, this man knows what
I cannot respect Faris Alwari. He is a failure as an Attorney General. He is a failure as a Minister of Rural Development of Local Government. Pocket squares does not fix potholes. I have no respect for that man. He is beyond logic, beyond law.
I will say
you use it very politely, and I respect you for that, Brian.
I will say it like this, that this man doesn't have a clue of what goes on in local government. He thinks, and he has degraded local government to make it think it's just going cutting bush, right? It is more than that. That local government plays major roles in our country, where you saw in 2010 to 2015, under the astute leadership in Tunapuna Piako Regional Corporation of one Khadija Amin, wherein that you saw the development of education by bringing about the University of the West Indies together with the Tunapuna Piako Regional Corporation to bring about what was called an educational city. And you also saw where you saw a borough corporation called the Shogun Borough Corporation becoming outstanding in the central region by then Mayor Suruj Ratan Rambachan, who became minister then. Then you came in and you showed the empowerment in Shogunas Borough Corporation by having one of the best markets. Because not only you would have what you call produce market, but you also created a market for persons who wants to get clothing, haberdashery. So now what has happened? The PNM, I always say, has no respect for local government. Brings you all back to when you want to have the people there who want to sell a ponga dashin for $5. And that's all you think local government is about.
Yes, thank you, Brian. Now I'm seeing the time, it is 9:13, and I would have told MP and our panel that we are finishing in an hour. We're going over time, guys. But MP, I want to close off on one thing. I want to ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you rate the new minister of, well, from 0 to 10, what do you rate the new minister of local government?
Well,
as being an advisor and an expert in the field now, an MP, what rating would you give him?
Faris Alwari has been a failure as an Attorney General. I still held a little hope out, hoping that he might find better footing in local government. He came in on a very high horse. He seems to think that this job is about public relations. It is not. He seems to think local government is about cutting bush and posing in a hiab. It is not. What I think he has to do is come down from there. He is ill-suited to be the Minister of Local Government. Keith Rowley has erred in appointing Faris Alwari as the Minister of Local Government because he does not have the competence, the capabilities, or the human connectiveness or common sense to understand local government and to really make things work better. I feel that it was that they needed to get rid of him as an attorney general, and so to not look too bad, they shifted him to local government. I think it's an insult to local government to have Mr. Alwari there. I want to take this opportunity to ask the chairman of regional corporations, both the UNC and PNM, who have expressed that sense of disappointment in Mr. Alwari, to just hold the strain a little bit, because I know that we have many competent chairmen of regional corporations in the United National Congress who have been holding the boat, holding their regional corporations together, even though they have been mistreated and abused and so on under this government. And they are still finding that under the leadership of Faris Alwari, what you have is PR and a lot of talk, but you don't have the action to go with it. You don't have a practical approach. You don't have common sense. So I have also taken the opportunity to write to the minister on a number of occasions. But I sometimes feel sorry for him because I realize he's just not capable. He just doesn't have what it takes. So I don't have a very high rating for him, but I do have hope that we will have an election soon and that the people of this country will see the incompetence and make a difference when they vote in the next general election and vote for the United National Congress.
So there you have it, guys. We have the Member of Parliament for St. Augustine. Quite an interesting discussion here tonight. A low rating for the Minister of Local Government, but a high rating for the hopes of the local government election when that bell is rung. So guys, this was just another episode of Critical Conversations with the Compass. We want to thank both of our guests here tonight, MP Amin and Mr. Brian Big. And without any further ado, thank you all for joining us. And we all look forward to sitting with you all next week, where we explore another critical conversation. Good night.
Definitely. Thanks, guys. See you next week.
Thank you very much.